Welcome to This Explainer. We're going to dive right into how you can use data to uncover the instructional story of each and every student in your classroom. We're looking way beyond just the cold, hard numbers today to see how this data actually speaks to us to reveal a very human story. Before we get into the heavy lifting with spreadsheets and analytics, I want you to ask yourself, what instructional story is your classroom data telling you right now? Think about the students you saw today. The data you have on them isn't just a record of what they've done, it's a living, breathing narrative about their current needs, their struggles, and their triumphs. To truly read that story, we're stepping into a specific, highly empowering role defined by the ISTE standards, the educator as analyst. This shifts your mindset from simply being a passive collector of grades to an active investigator. An analyst explores the importance of student data to understand each student's unique instructional story, and most importantly, uses that understanding to make future data-based instructional decisions. All right, here's our roadmap. We'll quickly cover the educator as analyst, the 4 types of data, multiple measures, classroom sources, tracking authentic data, and finally, driving instruction. Starting with Section 1, the educator as analyst. Let's look at our specific objectives for Module 7. For this module, our objectives are pretty clear. We're going to evaluate sources of classroom and school data to improve student learning. Then, we'll analyze that classroom data in order to make future data-based instructional decisions. And finally, we'll get practical by tracking, averaging, and graphing authentic classroom-based data right in a spreadsheet. Moving right along to Section 2, 4 types of data. Let's break down the categories. Basically, school data falls into 4 main buckets. You've got demographic data for context, processes for your programs and policies, perceptions for school climate, and student learning for performance. Pretty much every piece of data you collect lives in one of these 4 columns. Next up, Section 3, multiple measures of data. Let's see what happens when these categories start to intersect. This is where it gets really cool. Mixing these data types reveals not just what is happening, but why it's happening. Like, if you overlap student learning with demographics, you might suddenly see if different groups of students are experiencing school differently. Or overlapping student learning with school processes, that tells us exactly what specific programs work best for student learning. The deep analytical insight happens right there in the overlaps. And here's a massive light bulb moment. When you overlap different measures over time, you get profound insights. For example, looking at perception data over several years can actually prove whether the changes you made to the physical environment or school climate are genuinely improving student and parent attitudes. You're not just guessing anymore. The data's actually telling you the story of your success or failure. Okay, Section 4, classroom data sources. Time to zoom in on your informative tools. Think about your daily routine for a second. Brainstorm exactly what data sources you actually touch every single day. We all kind of default to thinking of data as that massive end of your state test, right? But as an analyst, your tool belt is actually so much heavier and way more versatile than that. The sheer volume of info at your fingertips is just incredible. Sure, you've got traditional grade books and cumulative folders, but you also have informal data. I'm talking about those chaotic stacks of anecdotal sticky notes covering your desk, parental input, and daily exit tickets. A truly effective analyst synthesizes all of this formal and informal source material to get a complete picture of the learner. Which brings us to Section 5, tracking authentic classroom data. Let's see how this actually works using spreadsheets. Let's walk through this real 3rd grade science gradebook for a unit on plants. You can see the students listed down the left, the points possible across the top, and the assignments, identifying parts of a plant, exploring variables for plant growth, and differentiating plants from animals. The spreadsheet has neatly calculated the student averages on the right, but as an analyst, you really have to look closer because some of these numbers are super tricky if you just take them at face value. Take a look at the 12% average for student number 5. If you're just skimming the data, you'd probably assume this kid completely failed to grasp the science concepts. But look at the actual assignment columns. They didn't score poorly. They were marked AB, absent for 2 of the 3 assignments, and scored a 3 out of 10 on the one they did take. The spreadsheet just mathematically averaged those absences as zeros, which deeply skewed their overall mastery representation. See, spreadsheets are fantastic for tracking and graphing, but they completely lack human context. Looking closer at authentic anomalies prevents us from making snap judgments. It forces us to investigate the specific student's circumstances. Student 5 doesn't necessarily need intense academic remediation on plant biology. They honestly might just need an opportunity to actually take the assessments they missed. The data flagged an anomaly, but the analyst uncovers the real story. Finally, Section 6, Driving Future Instruction. Let's talk about future action. The absolutely crucial point here is this: sharing extensive analysis, charting out Venn diagrams, and finding spreadsheet anomalies, it's all completely useless unless it drives your future actions. The most important influence of interacting with this data is thinking about what comes next for these students and for you as the teacher. Data isn't some post-mortem of what already happened. It is a strategic blueprint for what you're gonna do tomorrow. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to carry back into your classroom. Based on the data you've tracked today, whether it's an exit ticket, an observation, or a complex spreadsheet average, what specific, tangible instructional decision will you make for your students tomorrow? How will you step into your role as an analyst to change their instructional story? Thanks for exploring this with me, and happy analyzing